Welcome to Pod Places. I am Jeff Sigler with Revitalizer Die here in Pittsburgh.
And I am Phil Ike of Full Steam Social Media here in Bay City, Michigan.
Phil, how are all things in Bay City? How was your weekend? What have you been up to? What do you know?
I went up north with my family, my mom and dad and brothers and wife and child. They're hanging out at an Airbnb cabin up north around Mullet Lake, and it was supposed to be like a little mini fishing trip, but we didn't catch anything.
Uh,
So we just kind of hung out in cold, rainy weather, which makes for a surprisingly amazing cabin experience. You think that having terrible weather would be a giant bummer, but it's nice.
yeah. No, I think we went. We had a cabin last February, and it dumped snow, and it was the best. It was just like stay
Yeah.
inside, have some warm drinks, play games. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I think some of the problem, like I live most of my life on social media, and some of the problem of social media is that it's limitless. Like you can quote unquote experience anything you want to almost immediately. And so you have all these different options, and at the same time, you're not really experiencing anything. And so when you go to a cabin and there's no reception and it's rainy outside, so you have to sit inside all day, it really forces you to enjoy the moment, and it was nice.
Excellent. Good to hear it. Ryan will not be joining us again this week. Ryan has hit his busy season, I guess.
I
So
miss
it's
his face.
I know. He brings a better face to the podcast as well as more insightful
I was
words.
gonna say a better brain and a lot of a lot of other things.
Yes. Yeah, it's sad. So hopefully he clears his schedule up soon.
Yeah, our IQ quota will shoot through the roof.
Exactly. Exactly. We'll just be talking about Garfield books by next week.
Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah. How does Garfield relate to placemaking?
He loves lasagna. Uh, all things are good here. Good weekend, plenty of sports and whatnot. Had a kid go down to a broken finger in football, but
Oh no.
yeah. But things good. Great weather, lots of fire pits. It was fantastic.
Don't you have like a Blacktoberfest thing coming up?
Yeah. So
What's
I'm
that about?
big on block parties. Our municipality makes them really easy to put on. You fill out a little permit online, takes 5 minutes, just pay $25, and within a couple of days they let you know you have it. So it's really easy. I like an Oktoberfest, but there's some of those bigger things aren't going on this year. So we
Mm,
decided to put one together. We're going to get a keg of Oktoberfest, put it in the street. Um, Probably throw have some people bring some food. I got to look at all the rules and see what's safe and what not. But basically, drinking in the
mm.
street is seems permissible and like a good
So
idea.
the city will like come and shut down your street
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
night?
So
Is
they
that how that
will
works?
show up Saturday. They'll show up by like 3 o'clock and put out the sawhorses or whatever, the little barricades. You go and put them up, and then they'll come the next morning and pick them up. But it's awesome. Again, it's like
Hmm.
from 3 p.m. on. You pay $25 and they'll shut down the street, and you're good
That's
to
cool.
uh, you're good to celebrate. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, I love a block party and combine it with a little German beer.
Do you ever run into people on the block that hate the block party and they
No,
don't like it?
I'm sure there's some antisocial people that are like, I have to move this barricade. But for the most part, it's pretty much like it is very much the culture of this neighborhood. So most people are pretty cool
Yeah.
to it. So you're all welcome to come. I mean, you're all invited.
Fly on over to Pittsburgh, man.
Yeah, it'll be a good time.
I hear the actual Oktoberfest in Germany is insane. I interviewed a woman here in Bay City, and she said that she went to Oktoberfest last year and said it was just the craziest place ever. So that's on my bucket list. So bucket list one, go to Jeff's
Yes.
Blocktoberfest. Bucket list two, go to Oktoberfest
Yeah. Compare and
in Germany.
contrast.
Yes.
Compare and contrast. Um, this week we're gonna run down a couple things. Phil has been recently put out a piece through proudplaces.com on creating a campaign, Humans of New York campaign for your own town, and I really love this piece. I think it is such a great way to think about storytelling and making your city lovable and getting people attached and stirs up feelings of pride. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. And then I've been focused on talking about vacancy the last week or two, and how cities should approach vacancy and what needs to be done. I think it is a huge issue, and it all comes back to pride and proud places, and vacancy is a real apathy problem. And so talking a bit about what can be done and how to approach that. But Phil, you want to kind of jump in? So yeah, I love the piece. I thought it was awesome. I think that that's
Thank
such
you.
the one of the things that you said I think that was so valuable was like, you probably think your city doesn't have anything interesting, and like every single person has a fascinating story. So if your city has people, you're off to
Yep.
a really good start.
Yep. Yeah, and I kind of stumbled into this style of marketing just based out of pure ignorance because I had left my teaching job and I started working for my brother, and he's like, well, you're a kind of good photographer and you can make kind of good videos. How about you run our social media? And I didn't know anything about any of that. And I stumbled into like Seth Godin talking about storytelling, and I in other marketing tomes about storytelling. So I took it very literally, like, well, we just had to tell our story. And so it was just pretty much documenting our day-to-day operations and telling stories about the musicians that would play our instruments and all of these other things. And that eventually spread into my own me launching my own business that was very much based on storytelling. And when I got into the marketing realm, I saw right away that the word storytelling was so overused. Like it just we have such a bad habit, especially in marketing, of taking a really really beautiful great word and then
Mm-hmm.
just destroying it because it becomes trendy or like it makes us seem different, and people just abuse the crap out of it, and now everything became storytelling. And
Right. Where literally very little
yeah.
is actually storytelling that you see out
Yes.
there. There's a lot of marketing that's done, but I see very little storytelling being done.
Yeah, and it can be telling a great story, but then I'll always run into businesses or organizations that I do work for, and I'll create this video, and then they'll just want to blast their logo all over it. Like, well, can we have at least 15 seconds of our logo at the beginning and at the end, and can you watermark our logo in the lower right-hand corner? And then when I explained to them, well, the average person on Facebook will watch a video for 7 seconds. So they're not even going to make it through half of watching your logo. And you just paid me thousands of dollars to
Right.
create this video. It's not going to work. And so we kind of bastardize it too. And so when I started working with cities, I wanted to be very, very clear that we were only telling stories. And so the work just became me going into a business or contacting an individual who has contributed a lot to the community, or has a great history in the community, and just sitting down, talking to them for about a half hour, getting their quotes, taking pictures of them and what they do, and then just using that as our downtown area marketing material for the city of Saginaw. Because like Saginaw would see right through any sort of superficial marketing, fakery. They would call bullshit on it right away. And so how do you navigate that? It's by telling actual true
Right.
stories of the people that are there. There's no way to misconstrue it, or it won't come across as, well, we're trying to manipulate people. It's like, nope, we're just going to pummel you with beautiful stories of this area every single day, all day long, all year long, for at least 3 years, because that's the length of my contract, and just to see what happens. And so far, just really amazing things have happened.
I love it. And right, like you said, it cannot be faked.
Yeah.
It is not phony. And the thing that I really like that gets me about it is that it's just true. It's raw. It's honest, and like it makes me feel more attached. Like I am not
Yes.
from Saginaw yet. I feel much a greater attachment to it because of those. So I imagine for existing Saginaw residents, their feeling of love and attachment to their community must like have tripled in the last, since this started. And I think that that is so incredibly powerful. Like it's such a great reflection to say like, holy shit, we're really interesting. Like we're a cool
Yes.
place. We've focused our marketing for so long on these ideas that are external or like that are phony. They're like, oh, we're this thing that we're not, like come love us. And how does that make a resident feel when you're trying to sell this, fake phony shit, to where now focusing on how fascinating the people that are already there are. Man, it's great.
Yeah. I hadn't ever done work like this for a city before the city of Saginaw. And so I had kind of caught wind that they were looking for somebody to help them with marketing and social media, and the proposals were due the next morning. And so I ran back to my office and I sat in my office thinking, like, what would a great proposal look like? And I thought about my work with businesses, and the the best customer tends to be your current customer. It's if you can treat your current customers like kings and queens, they're going to keep coming back. They're going to come 3 times a week. They're going to tell their friends. And those are the people that you really have to focus a lot of effort on, because they can just mean so much for the life of your business. Yes, chasing new customers is very important, but if you're not taking care of your current customers, that turnover, you're going to be constantly fighting that turnover year after year after year after year. People come and eat there 2 or 3 times, and then they fall off the face of the planet because they feel neglected. So I thought, well, when it comes to a city, like, what is the first focus? It's got to be the people that are already there, because those are the people that are going to spend the most money at your local businesses, tell their friends about it, go on vacation up north and say, hey guys, this sandwich is great, but you should really check out blank in Saginaw next time you're there. They're going to be the people that support any sort of community development initiative, or they're going to be the first people to shout it down. And so if you're not doing something that really targets those people, you're missing 80% of the puzzle. And so I wrote the proposal in mind that, well, here's a 3-year contract. Year one, we're going to simply focus on reaching the people that live here with all the stories in the city in which they live. And you see it. The people that know the stories well will come out of the woodwork and say, heck yeah, I eat at his place every Wednesday. I love his sandwiches. Or they'll share posts, or they'll like posts, and they'll spread it throughout the world on their own. And then when we've tackled them and really built a great foundation, then we can start dipping our toe in maybe like a 20-mile radius around Saginaw, because those are the next most important people. And then after that year two, you've got this great foundation of raving Saginaw fans who are like, heck yeah, people, you want to live here, move here, invest here, do all these things, and they're going to support every single thing that we post and every single story that we tell. That's when you really have the magic happen. And in 3 years, which is not in the realm of stuff like this that long of a duration.
No, I mean, if you can cultivate a sense of civic pride over the course of 3 years, and sort of attach people back to their community, you've done something phenomenal. And
Yeah.
and it reminds me of kind of when our relationship started budding. Because I think that, I recall you putting some of this out there probably last fall, that
Hmm.
you were taking this approach, and I was blown away, because that's always been one of my great frustrations, is that cities have just become so externally focused. Like, how can we get more people to come visit? How can we get a new business to come here? Like, just completely turning their backs on the existing businesses and residents, and always looking to grow. How do we improve? How do we attract more? And it's like, well, nobody wants to come to a place that nobody already loves. Like the
Yes.
cliche, like, nobody's going to love you if you don't love yourself. And I think that that is so incredibly true for cities, that if all your residents hate it, or don't feel a sense of attachment, or some sort of engagement, like, why should anybody else come there? It's phony and it's insulting. And so when I saw that you were taking that approach to that request, I was blown away because like, oh my God, that's exactly what cities need to do, and that's going to be. This is what are we on? 40 years, 50 years of tourism being the same approach. Like, I'm so happy for that to die, and maybe a new way of thinking of if we cultivated a little affection from our residents, everything would fall into place. And so
Yeah.
it was exciting to see you do that, and incredible that Saginaw was willing to take a chance on a kid.
Well, and honestly, I give them the absolute most credit because they did. I mean, like I gave them examples of my work that weren't city focused at all. Like, this is what I do for businesses. This is kind of my vibe. These are my beliefs. And absolutely, they took a chance on a kid. So I will give them unending credit till the end of my days for being willing to do that. And it's just it makes so much sense. And it's not cultivating pride in your citizens at the expense of tourism, but I think people forget about the people who are here, and that's the problem. It's when you chase tourism as the only thing that is going to help your place, when I don't know, if you're in a city of 10,000, what if you had 10,000 people that would help your place?
Right, right. What are you
Yeah,
what are you trying to get tourists for? To convince you that you're good
yeah,
enough, or to shop in your stores, or to stay in your like, because most local, like, there, if you get your people that already live there to shop, you're in great shape. I mean, that's the real key. And then as
yeah.
far as like staying at hotels, like, who cares? How many hotels are locally owned? Very, very few.
Yeah, and you run into some pushback on this idea of residents first a little bit, from maybe from people in the government or people in, community foundations and things like that, who are really well connected, because in their brains and from their perspective, everybody here knows everything about the city because they know everything about the city. They know the people, they know the businesses, they know all of these things. And so in their brain, well, we don't have to tell these stories to residents because they already know that D'Angelo's Pizza serves great pizza. When I will tell you, almost every single story we post in Saginaw, somebody will come in and say, I've lived here for the past 30 years and
Right.
have never set foot in Huron Fish Company's place, but tomorrow I will. I will get my first fish sandwich from that place. And so you see it, and I know it for I know for a fact that's true from my own experience, because when I lived here in Bay City for the first time, I hated Bay City. I was at work all day long. I came home, that was it. Hated Bay City, didn't know anything about Bay City. I probably spent a cumulative half hour downtown over the course of 6 years. And then I moved to Saginaw, moved back to Bay City when I got married. And I remember talking to somebody from a community organization, and he was like, well, you don't have to tell anybody about us because everybody knows about us. And I'm thinking in my head, I didn't know who you were
Right.
until right now. And then when you said your name and like who you work for, I still don't know what it is you're doing. And I'm sitting across from you and having a conversation. Like, you literally hired me, and I still don't have any idea what you're doing. And so there's a lot of assumptions going on, and that can be a big like resistor to this kind of work, because people are saying, well, why would we do that? Because if they would have eaten that sandwich at that business, they would have already, and that's just not true.
It's such a funny thing where it seems like every city, there's this strange competition where every city is trying to attract the businesses and people of the other city. Like, it's such an asinine way to look at it when we're all competing. Like, oh, I don't care about the people here. I want your people, and you want my people. Like, wait. Let's
Yep.
think through this. Instead of
Y-
trying to steal all the business I have and all the money from the residents that I have, what if we did something else?
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and I think too that we overestimate the amount of people that it takes to really sustain. Like, let's keep focusing on local businesses, for instance. Like, we underestimate the amount of people that it takes to really sustain a local business. We're thinking we have to get so many people here, and we just have to keep pulling, tourists in and get convincing people to move because we needed this huge population of people to really make, our downtown area successful, or to make it seem like we're a place of vibrancy. And it's not true. Like Kevin Kelly wrote back a decade or so ago about 1,000 true fans. Like if you as a business can cultivate 1,000 true fans, that's people that are willing to pay you money for whatever it is you do, you can run a successful lifelong business on that. Like 1,000 people, that's not that many people, like a
Right.
1,000 fans. And so just really hammering home the importance of being connected to your place in the people that live there is such an important first step.
Right. And I always think back to, I take it when my grandfather was an entrepreneur in the town where I grew up in the 20s and 30s. And I think like, well, they weren't dependent on out of town customers.
Hmm.
They got by on the people that lived in town, which of course, like if your town is 200 people or 200,000, there's this perfect model of economic sustainability to where the goods and services that people require in that town will also produce in that town. That you don't need to overthink it. And so if like that works everywhere. And so if you just had more people in town producing those goods and services, simultaneously have, let the people in town know that those goods and services are available, everything would be fine. And you wouldn't have to spend any money on these, um, on this sort of tourism. And to your point earlier, I think it's important to mention like tourism doesn't make it a better place to live. Making it a better place to live, though, simultaneously makes it a better place to live and enhances tourism. Like one does not beget the other, but the one certainly focusing on making your town a better place to live,
Hmm.
cultivating affection, winning over residents, not only makes your town better, makes people happier, makes residents more engaged, will attract tourists, will probably help in economic development efforts. Like it does all these things that just simply like marketing outside of town that does one thing.
Yeah. And as you were talking, this kind of popped in my head, so it's tangentially related. But another resistance I get with this kind of work is that the people the people who hire me, or the people who are in a position who would hire me, they're not necessarily proud of their place. And so
Mm-hmm.
me coming in and telling a story about their place when they're not proud of their place, like that to them, it feels gross. But why would we tell stories to the rest of the world when, to me, in my brain, like our room is still dirty or our house is a mess? Like I wouldn't invite people to my house when my house is a mess. But the beautiful thing that I found in this work is that people love potential, and stories like this show potential. So I'll give you an example. I was interviewing, I had a day full of interviews about 2 weeks ago in Saginaw, and three of the interviewees, 3 out of 6, I believe, all highlighted that they started businesses in the city because it was a place that looked like people cared.
Huh.
So it wasn't like, oh, it's amazing, our downtown is full, because it's not. It's very vacant. Or it like, oh, it's you drive down the road and the houses are beautiful and XYZ, and there's so much of this, and the money was great and the market was great, because it's not really. It's very much a place in just building itself up from being decimated from the lumber era collapsing, and then GM was really the primary driver of employment for almost almost 100 years. I think it was like 90 years, and then they went bottom up in Saginaw, pulled their factory out. Economy just imploded, and so they're very much like digging themselves out of this giant hole, and people love that. One of the guys that I interviewed, he was in the army, and they moved something like 17 times in
Jesus.
10 years. It was just insane. And so he had seen all of these different places in the United States. And then finally, when he got out of the army, him and his family bought a house and then started a business in Saginaw. And I asked him, Dom, why?
Hmm.
Like, why? Out of all of the, like, you've seen more of America and lived in more of America than almost anyone. And he said, because this is a place that looked like people care about their future. So he didn't say anything about like, this is a place that is beautiful and amazing and exactly what I want. And he said, no, people just love it here and they're trying to create a better future. And that's what we miss in the storytelling of our cities is, well, we're almost waiting until all our stories are perfect
Right.
and then we can start telling them. And that's not what people are looking for. People are looking for the scrappy city that's digging itself out of COVID, or the city with a beautiful history that's embracing every single ounce of it, or it's the blue collar city that says, hell yes, we are blue collar and we love it and we want you to come here and be blue collar with us, and just really embraces who they are and what they stand for and the community of people that they're trying to build. Like, those are the things that we're missing. Like, we want to wrap a little bow around our little chocolate shops and that's what's attractive to people. And yeah, it can be, but meanwhile we're missing what is really attractive to people, which is a community with potential, with great stories and great humans.
And not to pat ourselves in the back, but I'm often amazed how we get in these conversations that how perfect the name Proud Places is. Like it
Yeah.
truly does encompass it so well. It is not a throwaway. It's not just, the fact that it's alliterative. Like it's exactly that individual you were talking about, they found that there was pride and that there's so few towns with it, and people want to feel proud. They want to associate themselves with something that makes them feel good, that
Yep.
makes them feel proud. And when you land upon that in a town, like you want to hold on to that, you want to stick to it because it feels so good. And it literally, like the place that you live, changes how you feel about yourself, changes your own self-esteem, because if that place is doing well. And it's such a rarity. And makes me think, jump back again to where, what you're talking about. It's like, think about these towns, think about Saginaw in the 1850s, when it was just getting started, and there was nothing, there was no industry, there was no, General Motors, or okay, so there was logging, but these towns were getting scratched out of nothing. I mean, absolutely
Hmm.
nothing. There were no huge employers. Everything had to be done by hand, by just, and how amazing that must have felt. Like how proud people must have been then. Like, holy shit, guys, we just built a town out of some rocks and sticks.
Yeah.
And like, I'm pretty sure we can do anything. I'm pretty sure we've got this. We can accomplish this. And that sort of pride and ability and confidence went away with big jobs. That sort of ability, like, hey, we can tackle it, we can make anything here, was lost when one employer came to dominate, and that happened everywhere. And so
Hmm.
all these skills and entrepreneurship and ability and craftsmanship and trades were wiped out. And that's what we have to do again. It's like, that's what it's cool when you see people brewing and distilling and learning to make clothes. Like, oh yeah, we have to rebuild the local economy like we built it the first time. And that's a long haul, because we had all the advantages of this generational talents that were passed down that were lost. And it's like, well, but we gotta sort it all out again.
Yeah, and it really comes down to basic principles of marketing. And I use marketing kind of in a uh I hate the word marketing. I hate the
Yeah.
word advertising because immediately it makes people skeptical. But um one of the foundations of marketing is that if you're focusing on the same things that everybody else is focusing on in your marketing, you will either have to be better than them, or do it cheaper than them, or you do it faster than them. And if you can do one of the things, you have at least a chance at being successful. Chances are you won't be, because there's just so many businesses, and with the internet I can buy from
Hmm.
every single one of them. If you can be two of those things, now there's a good chance you'll at least survive a year. If you can do all three of those things, then you've got a winner. And so when cities say, well, you can live, eat, and play here, And then the city 5 miles away from them says you can eat, live, and play here. And you can, and the next one says, well, you can work, live, and play here. And then the next one says, well, okay, cool. We're all talking about the same thing. So that means that my city has to be the entertainment capital of the region, the food capital of the region, the leading employer of the region, in order to win that battle. And I'm here to tell you, chances are you're not going to win that battle. But there's always going to be a place better than you. Why would people come and live in Bay City when they could go live in Vienna? Like, well, if we're talking about food and we're talking about entertainment, like go to Vienna, man. Like go live there because that's gonna check all your boxes. So what is the way that you win? It's by embracing who you are and what it is you do and amplifying your best to the world, and that's it, because that's going to be your personality. That's going to be the thing that you can win. That's going to be the thing that's going to attract these people that are going to make legitimate investments and commitments to you as a place, because they understand you as a place. They get it. And you're telling the truth to them, which is also super important. And so if you want to wage like the work, live, play war against other cities, like go for it. You're going to have to pump a lot of money into that campaign to convince people that you are the absolute best. And if you are the absolute best, like go to town, like work, play, whatever, because we're the best at everything. Like you've got a winner. But if you're not the absolute best in anything, it doesn't make sense to try to convince people that you are. Just convince people that you're you, and tell them like, hey, this is this person. He's taught piano lessons here for the last 90 years. And then the next day it's like, hey, he started 17 businesses in this city. Every single one of them failed except for this last one. And tell that story. And that's what's captivating and compelling for people.
I think what's so funny to think about you haven't thought about the live work play for a while, but basically what you're saying is like you can have a life here.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's not a great advertisement. You mean that I can live there? So like, okay, that should be pretty up for front. That's good.
Right.
I can also obtain employment, cool, and then I also can have some sort of social life. Like, that is the most like, ooh, this car will get you from point A to point B. Like, it is the
Yeah.
absolute worst marketing ever because it's that's the bare minimum that a community should do is allow you to live there.
Right.
It should be, can I have a dignified life here? Is it going to be a great living experience? I'm going to be proud of living there. Will I know a bunch of people? Will the city work its ass off to make sure that I'm having fun and that like there's opportunity? Like, yeah, just to live, work, and play is the bare minimum and what cities need to focus on. Like,
Yeah.
actually living here is going to be superior to living about anywhere else.
And that's why I really love the work that like Ryan Short does and Ben Molcho do, because they can sum up that individuality in really succinct and powerful branding.
Mm-hmm.
I think people like to latch on to the really stereotypical branding because it's the easy fruit. And if you're not in the marketing world, and you're a commissioner or you sit on the city council and it's the first time you've heard some of these stereotypical phrases,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to think, oh wow, that is really powerful. Like I really like it. Like it sums up everything that we want people to be able to do here. And so it makes sense. But then when you look at it on a macro level and you see 100,000 other places all using the same angle, even if it's not the same words, like that's probably not a battle you're going to win.
Nope, no. Right. And it's just, yeah, marketing between places is just such a weird thing in general.
Hmm.
And I don't know how it became such a popular thing. How we turn. I just would rather see every single, not your marketing dollars, not to you feel like, but if every city scrapped their chamber and their tourism office and even their economic development office and just dumped, I mean, you're talking about your typical city that's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and dump that into the like, I don't know, whatever it was that dumped it into beautification, hosting, throwing parties, like doing things that made people feel more connected and feeling good. And I mean, there's a million things that you could do with it. that would be such a better use in and how your city would just win every time, how it would kick ass. People would love it. They'd never want to go. Property values, like actually take all that money and just put it into teachers.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
simply right there alone, like put it into teachers pay, you would start winning everything anyway.
yeah, and I will say, I mean, I can't give actual quotes because it it's dependent on the place, but for relatively, it's relatively inexpensive work. You know, looking at what cities have paid for considerably less, and this isn't something that you have to pay me. You can grow your own storytellers in your own places, and that's something that you should. You have to be careful with that because not every photographer is a storyteller, and not every person who says that they're a writer is a good storyteller. And so there does have to be some vetting and some cultivation there. And or just because they're young and they use social media doesn't mean that this is the kind of work that you should be
Right.
paying them money to do. But like, you can support the people in your community who do have those skills, and now you're funneling that money back into your community, which is a beautiful thing. And it's relatively inexpensive in the world of marketing, so it's just the return on investment is just, it's just so huge. And I will clarify too, because this was a comment on one of the posts, was that this is like ripping off Humans of New York. And to clarify it a bit, the storytelling takes on its own form based on where it's grown and who's implementing it. So for example, for Saginaw, we feature one kind of story of the week, and that story is told through photography, through quotes and writing, through a video, and then also through a podcast called Right Here in Riverfront. And
Mhm.
so we tell that story in 4 different ways because not everybody is willing to watch a 2 minute long video. Cool. Well, we've told that story in a quote style, quick hitting, post that sums up their story with a beautiful portrait. Cool. We got them that way. Not everybody or people love podcasts, so they're going to sit and listen to the podcast. They may not be on Facebook all day and every day, but they are compulsive podcast listeners, and so that's something that we do for them too. And when you start this style of work, it's going to kind of grow into its own format. You might have the world's greatest videographer right in your town of 3,000. Well, now most of your content is going to be video because he
Right.
he or she does an amazing job. Cool. You could launch a podcast episode every single day of the week if you're in a highly metropolitan area and people are commuting a lot, and that's the primary vehicle of storytelling. So it grows into its own, based on the person implementing it and where it's being implemented. Just it just becomes its own thing.
Well, I don't think that you've ripped anything out. Just like Blacktoberfest, that was, I mean, it was a. It's hard to say where these things start.
Yeah, and honestly, the man on the street kind of style interviews started all the way back in the radio days with some great just people walking into with their field recorders into a city and saying, "Hey, stop by, let's chat for a bit." Um, I typically schedule all my interviews just out of a workflow thing. I don't sit on a street corner and just wait for stories to come, or find pedestrians on the street. So it's a highly targeted story acquisition process. But yeah, I mean, talking to people and hearing their stories has been a human thing since humans were a thing, and we somehow lost the power of that, and the power of stories to really bind people together. And even though I didn't experience that story that I heard or I saw or I was told, I live in the place where that story was told, and so it becomes part of my story. I have like an empathetic pride in the fact that that woman has been selling costumes for the past 45 years out of her costume shop,
Yeah.
and that she's been there, and she's one of the last people in this area that has a shop like that. I have I'm not a huge fan of Halloween. I don't go to costume parties. That's not my gig. But the fact that she's there doing that thing, that makes me feel pride. And so there's an incredible power that people are missing out on when they don't take the time and make the investment to do it.
So, um, yes, awesome, fantastic. I can't agree more. And I think pride is such an interesting concept once you start to dig into it. And I do think
Mhm.
that that identity is a huge part of it. Like, if you don't know who you are, if you're not really embracing your history and telling those stories, then there is no identity, and there's nothing interesting. There's nothing to be proud of there. One of the other areas that I've kind of adamant that how pride functions is aesthetics, appearances. That the way things look changes how you feel about them. There's no, like, the old adage, "Don't judge a book by its cover," is ridiculous. Because if, as humans, if we couldn't make the shortcut to make assumptions about something by its appearance, we would be screwed. Like, we all make assumptions about who a person is by how they look, whether something's quality by, by its appearance. And all of us make those calls. That if you drive into a town and everything's run down and worn out, you're gonna instantly assume, like, oh, this place sucks. This is a place where nobody gives a shit. I bet you the schools are bad. I bet you politics are all messed up. Like, I can make 100 assumptions about this place by the way their main street looks. And there's a good reason to do that. Like,
Yep.
that is a cognitive method in which your brain saves you a ton of time and helps you make better decisions. So if you see somebody, right, if you see somebody wearing their jammies in the middle of the day, you might jump to some conclusions. Maybe you're wrong, but typically somebody that's going to take a lot of care for their appearance is going to be somebody that cares how they appear, that wants to give off a good impression. Somebody that doesn't care for their appearance is not looking to impress other people. So, like, you're going to be right 9 out of 10 times. And so I've been really hammering on the idea of vacancy and blighted property this week, that and last week, that if your community is not doing anything about vacant and blighted property, you're sending the strongest message. You're the person in Walmart at 2 a.m. in their pajamas. Like, you're shouting, "We don't care about our appearances. We don't care what you think. Having any measure of standards isn't our thing. We let whatever flies here." And
Mhm.
I think that's it. Not only is it a poor message for the people driving through, it's a much, much worse message for the people that already live there. If you are looking out across, looking through your across your street or into your downtown every day, and you just see a bunch of rundown, dilapidated, blighted buildings, it's like, if you looked in the mirror every day, it's saw, you
Yeah.
know, that you were out of shape, that you had on, that your clothes didn't fit, like, it would change the way you felt. And, like, if you're looking into your downtown every day and these buildings are just deteriorating, you're going to have a terrible opinion of your city. You're going to be extremely apathetic, and you're just not going to care. And so vacancy is a big damn deal.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna highlight what you just said with the word, the especially the chronically vacant buildings. Like for me as a resident, every time I drive by a building that's been vacant for 5 years, 10 years, I mean, it's just such a sad thing. It's such a sad thing. One, because you can visually look at it and say, "Wow, man, that's such a cool building," and nobody's using it. But it also becomes sad on a subconscious level because it's emptiness and it's empty space and nothing's happening with it. It just becomes like part of who you are. Like, hey, I'm from blank place where half of our downtown is vacant.
Right.
It just becomes part of that story. To link it to what we were talking about before, is it's I think vacancies are it's always going to be a thing that places deal with. Every single place, everywhere, it's going to have vacant buildings, and it has to be addressed in some way. So it's not saying we're not casting judgment on any places that are like half vacant with downtowns like you suck. No, it's always going to be a struggle. But the thing that comes in to play is, are you doing anything about that place? Because we run into it all the time with these practically slumlords that have bought a bunch of property in a place, and they either still live there or chances are they live someplace else, and to them they can just sit on it. They can sit on it until they get the price that they want, and the price that they think somebody should pay, and they can afford to sit on a building for 30 years. And meanwhile, they're holding an entire place hostage.
Yep.
They're holding it hostage, and the place doesn't even know it. Doesn't even know it because they just, it's a vacant place where nothing's happened and they're busy people. They're going on with their lives. Meanwhile, it's like development and growth and culture has come to a screeching halt because you have somebody who could afford to buy all these properties and not do a single thing with them. And like that's, you have to be proactive about stuff like that. Like a city, you have to come to your own rescue by saying, how dare you,
Right.
how dare you sit on this beautiful building for the past 30 years that's been neglected? You haven't put a cent into it. I haven't seen a for sale or for lease sign on it for 35 years. Like, how dare you? And that you have to do something about it.
Right, right. And everybody's at that point, everybody becomes complicit. If all of you stood around and watched this building deteriorate over the course of 30 years, that then could have been maintained indefinitely and now needs to either be demolished or renovated at such a huge price, you're all complicit in seeing that happen because it didn't have to.
Yep.
Like the market is as such now that there is the demand for downtown buildings is far exceeds the supply. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's the assumption everybody makes. Well, there must not be anybody interested. Like, no bullshit. Like, if you were to fix that up, if somebody came in and fixed it up, they would have no problem leasing it. But they're not going to have the opportunity because the current owner who likely inherited it doesn't want to do anything. They don't care. They use it as a write-off, and you're letting them do that. You're letting them drain your town. And so I have no sympathy. I provide no quarter for the city leader that's like, well, it's tough on them, or that might, maybe they can't afford it. Like, I don't care. That's not, they don't have to own property. If it was my neighbor's property and she hadn't spent $1 on maintaining her house in 20 years, should I sit around and be sad that she can't afford it? Like, no, it's screwing up at the street. It's ruining
Yeah.
everybody else's property value. We get that. When it comes downtown and these bigger commercial properties, we take such a different approach, and it's frankly, it's baffling that more cities don't do anything because they have all the tools. The courts support it. There is no reason to leave property empty.
Yeah. In high school, I worked for a landscaping company, lawn maintenance. And whenever we were doing lawn maintenance, like every Friday, every other Friday or so, we would have assignments from the city to mow uh, lots, residential lots that hadn't been mowed. So these were lawns that had violated a community ordinance about the length of grass. And so the city would hire us. We would go in and we would mow the lawns, which was always super scary because you show up at somebody's house, they haven't mowed their lawn, and you're there mowing their lawn. Like they don't like that, and they don't like you. But it struck me that here we were being paid by the city to go mow these people's grass for them. Meanwhile, what I considered the actual city was completely like a ghost town. It was in disrepair. It was dirty. The windows were foggy with dust. But here we are just like mowing these people's lawns for them because they had this ordinance. Like, well, why aren't we also caring about these bigger issues? And of course you get into those issues and you find out the political side of it and the historical side of it, and everybody's kind of kicking their can down the road. Administration changes, like, well, this is something that we're going to address, and then you get a new city manager in and they're starting from scratch essentially. And yeah, it's just a really interesting thing because it's such a serious problem. It's such a serious problem. I mean, if you want to talk about, we use the buzzword density all the time. Like like there's your density killer
All right.
right there. Okay, if only half of your place has the ability to be filled, Like that's your place,
Right.
because the other half isn't ever going to be sold to anybody because they want $750,000 for a building that sat completely empty for the past 70 years, is in complete disrepair, and they don't want to invest money into it, but they really want that three
Yeah.
quarters of $1 million. Like that's never ever going to sell. Like a place in a income of $34,000, like somebody's going to come in and invest
Hmm.
$750,000 in a place that needs another $2 million of renovations. No, that doesn't make any sense. No
Right.
sane person is going to buy that building. And so now you've taken your density capacity, cut it in half, and said, well, here's city of blank, this is what you actually have to work with.
Right. It's like I'm trying to grow my family, but I did board up three of the bedrooms in my house. We're just not
Yeah.
going to use those. It is. I mean, the impacts are devastating. One, it's like, right, you can't achieve density because half these buildings are empty. Two, they're ugly. Three, they depress civic pride. Like people look at those and like, oh, I hate my town. My town is ugly. It sucks. I hate it here. Four, you're going to hurt property values of everybody surrounding it. Who wants to move to that town? Who wants to put a business near that? Like five, six, seven, eight. I mean, there are just so many reasons why you shouldn't do it. And then also, it's like, well, if you city came out and said, I'm going to pass legislation, which there's plenty of examples of legislation that deals specifically with that, that makes it uh, cost prohibitive to own vacant property, to keep it vacant. And then all of a sudden they'd get out. Somebody would come in because right at the 750,000, nobody's buying it. And that's the huge problem. It's like you can't have tomorrow's prices today. So the
Yep.
legislation is written in such a way that you actually are going to have it's going to get you so expensive that you're going to keep dropping the price. And eventually you're going to hit the price where the market actually works. Maybe because you haven't maintained it in 50 years, that price is a buck. Now somebody can buy it at a buck and make money off it. They can find a way to make money. So all of a sudden, I mean, I went through this in my old town that the city wanted to get 200,000 off of this piece of property that the municipality had bought. We're like, so your options are tear it down for 300,000 or try to get your 200,000 out of it. Like, let's think through this. Because
Hmm.
literally, if somebody buys it for $1, you've just come out $301,000 ahead, not
Right.
200,000 behind. And the city they finally sort of came to that notion. Somebody bought it and then they put 6 million into it. So like that, all of a sudden you think about all the materials were bought, think about all the jobs that were created during construction, think about the taxes that went out, think about the amount of civic pride and the long term. Like it's such an easy fix to go after vacant property owners, and it's amazing that it doesn't happen more often.
Yeah, and on social media, I see all the time people blaming the city for not filling those vacant properties, and that's not really the role of the city government. Um, it's not the role of the city government to put businesses into buildings,
It can't.
and so what is the thing keeping people from going into those businesses, well, or into those buildings? Well, the thing that nobody, or the prevailing thought of the public that people don't think about, is that it's that landlord. I mean, I'm thinking of a building here in Bay City that is primarily vacant, and I walked in there and I walked in there, I was taking some pictures, I was in there for about 15 minutes, and I walked out of the building and immediately threw up all over the sidewalk because walking on the floors made me car sick. The wood
Oh,
floors were so warped because they had never been repaired or replaced or anything, that I literally puked all over.
yeah.
I mean, I can see in the curb where I puked across the street because of how bad of a condition the floors were in. It's like, man, if the floors that people are on are like that, like what kind of condition is the rest of this building that has two more stories above it? Like this has to be an absolute unsalvageable
Right.
mess.
Right. And all you
And
had to do was maintain it. All somebody had to
all
do
you
was
had to do was
maintain it.
maintain it.
And the city had to enforce those codes. And it would have been
Yeah.
a building that could have housed all kinds of economic productivity but it wasn't done.
Yeah. And that so that's my encouragement to cities to really hold people accountable, because people think it's your fault and it's only your fault. People don't know the names of landlords, and generally they don't know who owns buildings. I get that question all the time. Hey Phil, do you know who owns this building? So they don't know the names of the people, but they do know where that building is and what city it's in, and so it
Right.
becomes the government's fault, just like every government. Like everything becomes the government's fault. And while there is a level of culpability there, like governments, people think it's all your fault,
Right.
and it's not. It's not all your fault. And so you have to take this step of holding these property owners accountable, like one, so that one less thing can be your fault, but two, you're the only body of people that can release the city from those chains. You're the only people with the power that can go to somebody and say, this is a completely inappropriate
Right.
use of our city, and we're not going to allow it perpetually for the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. However, like this has to change right now. And governments are the only people that can hold property owners accountable, and they have to.
Agreed. And I think it is government's fault. Like, yes, if somebody decides to no longer follow the rule of law, it is up to government. That is what we decided when we agreed to participate in having government. Like, if I decide that I just don't want to go the speed limit anymore, I should understand that there are repercussions to that. And we generally agree that that's okay. That's government's role to tell me, to punish me for that. And it's like, well, if I decide that I'm never going to cut my lawn again, I should realize that there's a punishment for that. And so when a city, all of a sudden, if a building downtown is falling into the street and the city's like, meh, it is the city's fault. Like the property owner is certainly screwing up, but that's what happens. Like people are going to break laws. We count on
Right.
government to enforce those laws, and they've stopped doing it. And so I do place blame at the feet of local municipalities for not enforcing the laws that are on the books, for lowering standards to the point that they've done so much self harm. And so I do think cities are complicit in it, and they have to do better.
Um, I think too that people underestimate the potential of just simply giving an opportunity for somebody better to come along. It's like, well, if like for instance, the building that I'm in, you can see it if you're watching on video. Oh, I guess you can't. Never mind. It's a beautiful building. It was previously a bank, and then before that, it was kind of an office building back in the early 1900s. And when it was a bank and then became vacant, the people that owned it, they were going to bulldoze it and it was going to become a parking lot. So this gorgeous building was just going to be like a parking lot right here in the heart of downtown. And like that wouldn't have been good. So instead, Jen came along, bought the building, created like a mixed use, obviously an office building. There's a restaurant right behind me, and then there's relatively expensive apartments upstairs. And people were like, "Oh, nobody in Bay City is gonna want to live in those."
People in
Filled
our
them up.
town don't like nice things. We hate
Yeah,
nice things here.
yeah. And so she filled all the units except for one before they opened. And I talked to her the other week. I asked her how things were going, and she said, "Well, all the units are full, and we have a wait list of like 26." Like literally, people on a wait list saying, "Whenever a place opens up, let me move in."
Fill every single project I've seen in the last 15 years, every single project where somebody has renovated a downtown building, there's never a problem for commercial or residential
Yeah,
tenants. Like they've never failed, yet every single city still sits back like, nobody wants that, won't work here.
yeah, and I think and I hate to use the G word, but part of people's fear is gentrification, and that's a real fear. Gentrification happens, and when it happens, it's terrible. But that when you say that something like this is gentrification, that requires an understanding of the word and it also requires an understanding of what your community needs. And I'm going to say that a lot of our small, mid, and larger cities, they simply need more people closer together in the same place, caring about the place that they live.
Right.
That's step one. And so just because somebody comes in and makes an investment or starts a business that you don't like, that doesn't mean that you get to use the G
That
word
is
and
not
call
right.
it. And it's not right. And that's what scares people away from making investments
Right.
like
Because
this.
please tell me, how do you gentrify an empty building?
Yeah. Well, how do you gentrify an empty building, and how do you gentrify a place where there's not a whole lot of other things going on? It's like everybody benefits from
Uh,
this.
right.
And there are homes like a street across from me. This development is not pushing them out.
Right.
It's not pushing them out. It's not displacing them. If anything, it's raising their property values and it's
For
making
sure.
them richer. Like that's what they need. They need their properties to be more valuable so they become more mobile if that's something that they want.
Exactly.
And
It's
so
right.
like
Right.
before this, like you guys were like it was hurting you and now it's helping you, and people have to be a little bit more aware of that just because a building becomes vacant and or just because a vacant building becomes nice or it becomes nicer than it was doesn't make it evil.
No, no, it's like if a cornfield gets developed into a subdivision, nobody's out shouting like, "You guys, you guys gentrified that cornfield."
Yeah.
Like, nope, it was changed. Its use has been changed. And while I admit it's an issue somewhere, that word gets thrown around way too much, and it actually becomes an impediment to doing the real revitalization work in the towns that we're familiar with.
I just saw a comment. There's an old house, like 1880s in Saginaw. Uh, Big history. I'm not going to get into it. Ended up vacant when the property owner died. It sat there, trees growing over the top of it. I mean, it was a complete mess. This like 20, I think he was 24 at the time, 24-year-old kid interested in development. Uh, Takes possession of the house and he starts renovating it. He wants to turn it into a community center, like kind of like a welcome center for the city of Saginaw. And it's across the street from a hospital, vacant lots all like surrounding it. There's not a whole lot going on. So this old historical building that was going to get turned down, he renovates it and is turning it into a community center. And someone got in the comments and accused him of gentrifying the neighborhood. And that it's so harmful to this conversation of vacancy and development and increasing the life and the pride of a place when people throw around terms like that
Right.
in places where they're not appropriate. Like gentrification is a real issue, and when you throw it into a historical building turning into a community center that was going to get demolished and say that that's gentrification, you're not, it's not a null set. Like you're doing a giant harm to places where that's actually happening and
Right.
conversations where that might be appropriate.
Could not agree more. It's one of those words like I wish we could put it back in the bottle, or not let it exist outside of the 10 cities that are actually dealing with it, because it
Or
really
yeah,
it
or just
started.
host like a 10-minute webinar for
Right.
every person on the planet. Like, hey guys, we're just going to talk about the definition of this, and then
Right.
you have to go and you have to apply it to your own place, because there is a little bit of gray area there, but it takes knowing your place and knowing what's happening and knowing the project and knowing the community and saying, well, how is this playing into the life of a community? What does our community need or not need? You have to know all of those things, and then when you've looked at those things, then you can say, is
Yes.
this the G word or not?
But not until then.
Yeah.
We got a wrap, man. We man, that went quick.
Yeah, we bantered good for about an hour.
We
If you
did.
want to continue hearing us banter, you're in luck because you can listen to all of our Pod Places episodes on iTunes and Spotify and Google. Just type in pod Places, and you get all our past episodes. You can head to our website, proudplaces.com, see all our content. We post new articles at least twice a week, big, meaty, amazing, but yet easy to digest articles from a couple of our contributing partners every single week. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, follow us all the places.